All right, let's jump right into one of the biggest lessons from Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We're going to unpack his very first lesson, and it's an idea that honestly could completely change the way you think about making a living. And this quote right here, this is the whole ball game. It sounds so simple, but the shift in mindset it represents is just huge. It's the big dividing line we're going to explore today, all through the story of a 9-year-old kid. So picture this. It's 1956. A young Robert Kiyosaki is feeling that sting of being the poor kid. His friends are going to the beach house and he's not invited. It hurts. So he goes home and asks his dad a question that literally sets his whole life on a new path. Dad, can you tell me how to get rich? And right off the bat, he gets two completely different answers, like night and day. First, you've got his real dad, the man he calls his poor dad. He's a brilliant academic who gives him the standard advice, right? The safe route. But then there's his best friend's dad, his rich dad, who tells him something totally different. Learn how money actually works so you can make it work for you. So, what do two 9-year-old boys do with that advice? Well, they decide to literally make money. Their first business idea is kind of brilliant, actually. They go around the neighborhood collecting old lead toothpaste tubes, they melt them down over a grill, and then they try to cast their own nickels. Now, yeah, it was totally illegal, but you gotta admire the ambition, right? The sheer creativity. So when his dad catches them in the middle of their counterfeiting operation, you'd think he'd be furious, but he's not. He calmly explains why it's illegal, but then he says this. He praises them for trying something, and that little bit of encouragement, even though they failed, is what gave Robert the courage to go ask his friend Mike's dad for some real lessons. And this is where Rich Dad really enters the picture. This guy is busy building an empire, but he's not flashy. And when the boys ask him for lessons, he makes them a very strange offer. He says, sure, I'll teach you, but not in a classroom. You're going to work for me. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. And just look at this job offer. 10 cents an hour. Even for a kid in 1956, that was basically nothing. And the job? It was mind-numbingly boring. For 3 hours every single Saturday, they would just dust canned goods in one of his stores. This was never just a job. Oh no, this was a test. So after 4 weeks of this, making a tiny 30 cents every Saturday, Robert has had it. He is so done. He feels used, he's angry, and he feels like he hasn't learned a single thing. He's missing his softball games for this. So he decides, that's it. He's going to go confront Rich Dad and quit. But of course, Rich Dad was totally expecting this. This was part of the plan all along. He tells Robert that the lesson has already started. That feeling of frustration, the anger, the low pay, that was the lesson. He called it a taste of life. See, life doesn't give you lectures. It just pushes you around. And every push is a chance to wake up. And that little taste of life was the perfect setup for, well, maybe the most famous concept in the whole book. A trap that Rich Dad calls the rat race, and he's determined to teach these boys how to stay out of it. So, what is the rat race really? It's this vicious cycle most people are stuck in. It starts with fear, the fear of not being able to pay your bills. That fear makes you work hard. Then you get your paycheck and desire kicks in. You start thinking about all the cool stuff you can buy, and that pattern just repeats forever. And this is exactly what it looks like. It's so simple, it's almost brutal. You get up, you go to work, you pay your bills, and you do it all over again. And here's the crazy part. Even if you get a raise, the pattern doesn't change. The bills just get bigger. The car gets nicer, the house gets bigger, and you're still stuck on the same hamster wheel. So, just when Robert thinks he's getting it, Rich Dad hits him with a real curveball. He says, okay, back to work. Except this time, I'm not paying you anything. Nothing. The idea was to completely break his brain's addiction to a paycheck, to force him to stop thinking like an employee and start looking for opportunities that were hiding in plain sight. Rich Dad's whole philosophy is that if you want to escape that rat race, you absolutely have to learn to master the two emotions that fuel it, fear and greed. And to teach them this, he doesn't give them a lecture. Nope, he gives them another real-world test. So, after the boys have been working for free for a few weeks, Rich Dad calls them in, and he starts dangling a carrot. He offers them a raise, 25 cents an hour. That's more than double what they were making before, but they stay quiet.
Then he really ups the ante. Okay, fine, $1 an hour. Now Robert says you could feel his heart start pounding. His brain is just screaming at him, take it, take the deal. But somehow, he says nothing. Rich Dad just smiles and goes even further. $2 an hour. You have to understand, in 1956, that was insane money for a 9-year-old. Robert could already see the new baseball glove, the candy. The desire was almost overwhelming.
And then comes the final offer, one that's so ridiculously over the top that it just breaks the spell. $5 an hour, more than most grown-ups were making. It was so absurd that the greed and desire just vanished, and their minds became clear again. They'd passed the test.
And that was the whole point. Rich Dad was showing them that most people have a price because we let fear and greed make our decisions for us. By saying no, the boys learn to step back and observe their emotions instead of just reacting to them. And that is the very first step toward financial intelligence.
So now, with their minds finally free from chasing a paycheck, the boys were ready for the real lesson. They were ready to start seeing the world differently, to see the opportunities that everyone else was too busy to notice.
And wouldn't you know it, the opportunity was right there in the store the whole time. Robert noticed the manager, Mrs. Martin, tearing the front covers off old comic books. She'd send the covers back to the distributor for credit, and then just throw the rest of the comic away. So he asked a simple question. Can we have them? The answer? Sure, as long as you don't sell them. And this is where it gets absolutely brilliant. They couldn't sell them, right? So instead, they created their first real asset. They took all those free comics, cleaned up an empty room in Mike's basement, and opened a comic book library. They even hired Mike's little sister to be the librarian. Kids paid 10 cents admission, and they could stay for 2 hours and read all the comics they wanted. And get this, they were pulling in an average of $9.50 a week.
And that was the lesson. Because they weren't getting a paycheck, they were forced to use their minds to spot an opportunity. They built a little system, an asset, that made money for them even when they weren't there. The comic book library was working for them. This is what Rich Dad was trying to teach them from day one. So at the end of the day, this isn't really a story about comics, is it? It's about a way of thinking. It's about training your mind to see value where other people only see trash. And that really leaves us with one big question to think about. What are the free comic books in your life that you might be walking past every single day?